Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to talk about the things that ruined the Code Vein experience. You know, I'm a big fan of the game, but I gotta admit that this game has a lot of issues in terms of its combat, in terms of a lot of different things. And it's not just a bunch of issues that it has, there's also a bunch of missing things that I wish the game had, and maybe we'll have it later in the future with some updates. We'll see. But anyways, so in this video we're going to address all sorts of little things like that, and there's going to be timestamps, so if you want to skip and don't want to see some parts of the video, feel free to look for what you want. Alright, so let's talk first about things that concern the character creation in the game. Obviously the character creation is huge in this game, there's a lot of things that you can do, but there are some stuff that make me a little bit disappointed into it, especially in terms of the outfits and the variety it has. There's only 7 outfits, I think, for both genders, and it's not much, to be honest. It's not really that much, and I wish there were more outfits. But on top of that, I don't necessarily wish for more outfits in the future, but I wish mostly for a feature that would allow us to mix and match different parts of some outfits. I think it would have been better if the outfits were made in different parts. It would be more interesting, because for example, recently I wanted to create Claire from Golf 3. She kind of has a bunny girl outfit, kind of catchy, kind of very interesting to look at, and it's good for my views, you know. But I couldn't, because her different outfit parts do exist in Code Vein. However, they're all scattered around in 3 different pieces, like they're scattered in 3 different outfits. For example, the top part exists, the arms exist, the skirt and shoes also exist in the game, but they are all scattered in 3 different outfits that the game offers. So I wish that was a thing. Another thing I wish the character creation had was the option to view our character with the blood veil, so we could have a sample of what our character would look like during the combat. It would be during the exploration. It would be more interesting to look at that. Another thing that I wish Code Vein had was also an option to toggle the gas mask on and off. This is something that exists in games like Monster Hunter World or even Final Fantasy XIV, where you can toggle on and off your helmet, the helmet of your character. I think that would have been pretty cool as well. Alright, now enough rambling about the character creation. There's a lot more important things that we have to talk about, especially when it comes to the combat. So the combat in Code Vein, how is it? How do I like it? I like it a lot. I think it's pretty enjoyable in my opinion, but I would say it's 90% enjoyable, mainly because of the ability system that Code Vein has. Very good ability system, but Code Vein being a Souls-like game, there are some stuff that shouldn't be neglected. And unfortunately, when it comes to the Souls-like aspect of the game, there's a lot that has been not so well handled by the developers, I would say. So in terms of the Dark Souls aspect, if you come directly from Dark Souls or Bloodborne, there's a high chance that you would be very disappointed with the combat system of the game. There's a lot of little different things that are a bit annoying in Code Vein. For example, enemies not staggering every time on hit. Back hitbox being really ridiculous. Sometimes you find an enemy that is bigger than a freaking garage door, and you cannot even hit the back of that enemy for some reason, cannot get the backstab. It's a bit annoying as well. Some enemies being way too fast for their own good, you can almost call them literally stupid at that point. And a bunch of little different things. Aside of that, there's also a bunch of limitations, or should I say restrictions, that they put on our character that I would say that are a little bit unnecessary. I don't think we needed that, and I think the gameplay of Code Vein would be better if they would just go away. For example, in terms of healing is very slow. It restrains your stamina, it restrains your movement as well, makes you slower. So if at least the healing was faster, it would be better in my opinion and more reliable. It's also a pretty weak ability. They call it regeneration, I think, but it's a pretty weak ability. I don't like it very much. There's also the fact that the stamina management is not too good in this game, because it causes a lot of downtime on your in the combat. For example, when you're trying to buff yourself, you don't recover stamina. Swapping weapon slows down your stamina recovery, slows down your movement as well. Using items slows down your stamina recovery, slows down your movement as well. Using a buff, literally you don't move when you're buffing yourself. You don't recover stamina at all when you're buffing yourself as well. And also when using any sort of ability in terms of attack, you don't recover stamina at all. So it causes the combat to have a lot of downtime where you have to wait for your stamina to recover, because when you're trying to buff yourself you don't recover stamina. When you're trying to heal yourself, your stamina doesn't come back that much. So if your stamina is already low, it really causes your character to wait for a good moment before you're able to attack again. So there's a lot of little things like that in Code Vein. It's a little bit annoying, I would say, and it would be better if we had more moments where we could recover our stamina, or where we would be free to move the way we want, like when using an item maybe, or even when swapping weapons. I don't understand why swapping weapons also slows down stamina, our movement that much. Anyways, aside of the little restrictions that we have in this game, there's also some other stuff that are a little bit annoying, especially in terms of weapons. Weapons in this game are really fun. There's a lot of them that are really fun, but there's also a lot of them that are kind of trash. For example, you have hammers. Hammers all look terrible. They have terrible looking animations. You have the huge hammer, for example, which has a nice rush attack on its charge heavy attack. However, the issue with that attack is that it doesn't go that far. The rush is very short. It doesn't last for very long. It's a multi-hit. It would be more interesting if they would double the time on the rush, and the travel distance would be pretty cool. Same thing for, let's say, Impulse Anchor. Impulse Anchor looks pretty nice. Huge hammer with a reactor on it, but the heavy attacks of it looks cool. However, doesn't travel that much. So there's a reach issue with the hammers, and not just with the hammers, but with most weapons, even with the bayonets bullets. Like some bayonets have very short bullet distance, like a very short range with the bullets, and I think it's intentional. But the issue is that they become close range weapons at that point, and bayonets are pretty slow in terms of shots, so it makes them very unreliable. And you will also notice that the companions using the bayonets are the worst companions in the game, meaning Eva and Mia. They die very fast because they're so busy casting other things like buffs and different spells. It takes all of their ichor, and it's actually more important than their shot and them shooting, because shooting isn't very good in this game. So you have issues like that, but overall I would say that in terms of weapons, Code Vein has an issue with the reach. Like, a lot of weapons don't have reach. They have trouble reaching the enemies, and it's because the travel distance of your weapon is very short in general. For example, you would use a move like the launch attack. Launch attacks don't make you travel very much. You use basic attack with a Queen Slayer blade, for example, doesn't make you travel as much either. So travel distance is an issue. A lot of times your moves will whiff, and then you'll get punished, so it's a bit annoying. There's also another issue to where your character gets stuck in a lot of animations. For example, when you're getting revived by your teammate, you're trying to recover from the revive animation, you can get hit during that animation because it's a long recovery animation and you're not invincible during that time. There's no iframe there, so it's a little bit annoying as well. There's also the fact that hit stun animations really bad. They're really bad in terms of duration. They last for way too long. You get stun locked very easily in this game, and it becomes pretty much stagger city, so it's not very nice. It's very funny because a lot of people have been comparing this game to Dark Souls 2, and I think I see the comparison. I think I understand why they say that. There's a lot of different things that are a little bit annoying, and I wish they would just go away. So the other thing that we're going to talk about is about stuff that are more related to, let's say, game design stuff, especially in terms of dungeons. I think the dungeons in Code Vein are pretty nice. I think they're all right. A lot of people would say that they are bad compared to Dark Souls, but not every game can be like Dark Souls. It's a pretty difficult thing, and that's the specialty of From Software. From Software is very good at making level design. They're really good at that. And I think that's the main strength. Like you would see that in Sekiro, you see that in Dark Souls, you see that in many different games that they have. Pretty good at level design. And if you don't have the same quality, what are you gonna do? You're just gonna drop your game because you can't have the same quality? No, you're still gonna make the game, and you just have to do your best to make it enjoyable, make the dungeons enjoyable. Code Vein, I think they do it fine. They do a fine work at that. But there are some dungeons that need to be how do you say that? Rethink? Rethought? Rethink. I think it's rethink. Anyways, for example, we all know the Cathedral. Cathedral is a huge mess. It's a really big issue in Code Vein because everything looks similar. We get lost very easily. There's no real structure to the map itself. We go a lot left and right, and we don't really know where we're going. It's a little bit annoying. And I would say that it's mainly because that dungeon doesn't have structure. First of all, it doesn't have much of a change in the scenery. There's not really a change in the scenery. There's not a memorable location to that dungeon except for the part where you're already in front of the cathedral itself, the part where you're at the end of the map. So it's a huge issue, and I think they should do a better job at making things more memorable during the exploration in that map. It's still possible, I think. And it would be probably possible by making different things, like giving a theme to some areas of the cathedral. Like they have these little trees, these little white trees where they have blood tears on them. They have them a bit around in the map, and it would be nice to have like a whole section of that map with just the little trees around like that. It would be pretty cool. It looks pretty too. So it would be a good asset to spam in that area, so we know we are in the section where there's a bunch of trees, Really cool to just change the scenery a little bit so we know where we are. But instead of that, everything looks the same. A map like the Reach of Frozen Souls is pretty nice because we know where we are. The scenery changes a lot in the Reach of the Frozen Souls. So I like that dungeon a lot. It would be nice if the cathedral was a bit similar to that one. There's also other dungeons that have some issues. For example, the desert map where the Mistal location is pretty bad because we have to go through a really long run before we reach the boss fight. I'm pretty sure the developers are aware of that, and they should definitely change that. It's not a funny joke. I'm pretty sure they thought it was a funny joke, but it's not. Also, we have the second to last area. I don't really remember the name of it, but it's not a bad area necessarily. It's not a bad dungeon. My only issue is that there are way too enemies in that dungeon, and at some point it becomes boring to the point where the only thing I did when I was exploring that place, I was just sprinting all the way through it because it was really boring with the amount of enemy they had to made me fight. Finally, we also have the last area of the game, a really terrible dungeon. I do not like that dungeon at all, and a lot of people didn't like that dungeon either, and it's because that dungeon has the same issue as the cathedrals where you get lost very easily. You don't know where you are. The dungeon itself is very narrow. There's a ton and tons of enemies. There's like 5 enemies in a tiny place, like in a very narrow space that you have to fight. It's really annoying. They do that a lot in that dungeon, and on top of that you have to deal with a bunch of traps as well. So it becomes a little bit annoying to explore the final area of the game. It's supposed to be a bit exciting, supposed to be a bit intense, but it just becomes very tedious to explore at some point, and it really kills the fun of the game. It makes the game really boring, and it's because there are just too many enemies in that dungeon. I just think they have to get rid of all of the basic loss that are in the area. So for example, you have the basic loss with the bayonet, with the halberds and the short swords. You can just get rid of all of these guys, and of the dogs as well, cat dogs, whatever they are. You can just get rid of them and leave the Argent Wolf soldiers and the big ladies with the hammers or the axes, and it's completely fine because the Argent Wolf soldiers themselves, they already create a lot of ambush, so you don't need to have to deal with other basic laws that are literally unnecessary. So we don't need all of that, and it's really mentally draining to run through that dungeon because you get lost and then you have too many enemies to fight, man. It's just too much. Now, on top of that, we also have an issue with some of the bosses in Code Vein. For example, the Insatiable Despot. It has 3 problematic moves. First of all, during its first phase, it would have an overhead attack that would deal a lot of damage, and that is also unreactable. During its second phase, it would also have a quick double sweep move that is kind of unreactable as well, and that will also deal damage for at least 75% of your health. Pretty annoying. Third thing is going to be a double spin in its second phase. Like the double spin, the spin itself, you can see it coming, it's very easy, and you can dodge the first spin, but the second spin needs to be delayed because currently it's too fast to the point where as soon as you dodge the first hit, you will get hit by the second attack. It's pretty annoying, and it deals a lot of damage as well. Another 75% of health gone. So very, very annoying boss to fight at that, because of that. Now, we also have to talk about the Blade Bearer and Cannoneer. So, it's hard to not talk about this boss because it's probably the most, I would say, infuriating boss in the game. It's probably the most annoying boss fight you have to deal with. Yes, I know they wanted it to be that way. I know they wanted the boss fight to be annoying and to be difficult and to be really to be a big struggle, especially for people who play the game alone. But you would probably say that all of these issues I'm talking about is because I was playing the game alone, not the way it was intended by the developers. But trust me, even if you play with the AI, you will still feel all of the issues that I have been talking about so far. So issues with the Blade Bearer and Cannoneer. One of them mostly being about Cannoneer. Now, I know they didn't want this boss fight to be too similar to Arsene and Smolv from Dark Souls. I'm pretty sure they didn't want it to be that way because I don't see otherwise why they wouldn't. They would make it the way it is. But the Blade Bearer is already a big issue that we have to deal with. She's not necessarily too difficult, but she deals a lot of damage. She's pretty fast, and the fact that it's a duo boss fight, it becomes very intense. It becomes very difficult to manage things. So Blade Bearer puts a lot of pressure on you, and then you have Cannoneer. The issue with that guy is that he has a fireball move that he would use from time to time, and that move comes out way too fast. There's no telegraph, there's no sound cue, no audio cue. I hope they've changed that move so it can have some sort of telegraph to it. Would be pretty cool. Also, he has this annoying flamethrower move that is an issue because it's a multi-hit. It can hit stun you, so because of the hit stun, it becomes a stun lock thing. Like you get stun locked non-stop, and it becomes really annoying. It's very infuriating because as soon as you get stunned like that, the Blade Bearer is not wasting time to jump you, so she just does it and bam, you're dead. That is also something that has to change. On top of that, another issue with Cannoneer is that he's able to run. I don't know why they made it so he would be able to run towards you, but that's an issue. He's already putting a lot of pressure with his range attacks. I don't see why they would make it so he can run towards the player. That's just too much pressure at that point. Alright, so overall, Code Vein has all of these issues, but I also wanted to talk about something that is a little bit problematic, is that all of the issues that I've been talking about so far, they all stack on top of each other. And overall, Code Vein has an issue to where the developers, when they made it, they focused too much on the aspect of Dark Souls that is kind of frustrating. Like they focused a lot on the part where they wanted the player to get frustrated. The issue now is that the frustration in Dark Souls doesn't come from the fact that the game itself is designed to make you mad. The thing with Dark Souls is that when you play the game, you get frustrated because, for example, things are really difficult overall, and it's not because your character is limited or something. It's because you don't know what you're facing most of the time. You don't know what enemies do to you. You don't know what they are going to do to you. So that's where the frustration comes from. It comes from the fact that you're trying to explore, trying to make progress, and you're facing something that you don't know about. And sometimes you're starting to learn about it, and they kill you, and they just had 1 health left, and it gets frustrating at that point. It's basically because the player is too dumb to make the progress. So It's not intentional if the game design is trash. And that's the mistake that Dark Souls 2 made. That's the mistake that most of the bad Souls clone make as well. So Code Vein is, even though I like it, I think it's a good game. It's an enjoyable game overall, but it's not a good Souls game. Like, for its genre, it's not that good. So yeah, I think it's very close to that. It should just get rid of all the things that annoy the player for no reason other than the developers thinking that it's the way things should be. And on top of that, Code Vein has an issue with the aspect of risk and reward. This is something that I wish the game had more, and Code Vein can have that aspect, but I was thinking about it and I thought that there are different things in Code Vein that should be core mechanics that are instead locked as passives. For example, you would have something like a passive that will allow you to regenerate your health after using a drain attack. It doesn't regenerate for much, it's a very tiny amount. There's also a passive that allows you to gain focus when using a drain attack. And finally, there's one also that allows you to restore your stamina after landing a parry. But I think instead of restoring your stamina, it should increase your focus gauge. So first of all, focus. Why is it important to know what it is? Focus is pretty good. It's a really good mechanic that also refills your stamina and also allows you to resist stagger more. So it puts you in a state where you're really kind of strong and you can fight multiple enemies at the same time, and it kind of refills your stamina as well. So it helps for stamina management. Now, regenerating health after using a drain attack is important is because it fixes the health management as well. So all three of these passives should be core mechanics in my opinion, because they all share the same aspect of risk and reward. Take the risk to parry an enemy, for example, you gain focus as a reward. You take the risk to continue the progression in the dungeon without having any other heal. You get rewarded with the progression because you're able to kill enemies efficiently and landing drain attacks actually. And on top of that, it gives a purpose to drain attacks, because currently nobody uses charge drain attacks or combo drain attacks. Everyone is only using backstabs, parry and launch attacks. So it gives a purpose to charge drain attacks, and it also gives a purpose to combo drain attacks because they're also very important moves. Now, another aspect of risk and reward the game should have, and I wish it had it a long time ago, is about boss fights. I've always wished for this game to have a mechanic which would allow us to kind of knock down the bosses by landing parries on their attacks. That would be so awesome. It would make a lot of boss fights more manageable and probably make them more fair in a way. For example, fighting the blade bearer and cannoneer would be easier if we could effectively knock down the blade bearer every time she was jumping us. Same thing when we fight a boss like, for example, Gilded Hunter, which is by far my favorite boss fight, by the way, and which has a berserk mechanic to where it becomes completely crazy. If we could knock him down during that time, it would be so smart. Imagine, it would be so great if he could get knocked down with time, and it's a reward for the player for being good and landing that parry. Another boss that would be a lot more easier would be probably the Butterfly of Delirium, which is a problematic boss at the start of the game. So Code Vein is definitely missing a lot of risk and reward mechanics. It's focusing too much on having this artificial difficulty that it shouldn't have. So I think I've talked about everything that I had on my mind. By the way, things have been leaked for this game, especially in terms of DLC content, so it's interesting. And apparently they are going to add some of the God Eater monsters. I'm not really sure how it's gonna work exactly, but if they're going to add them, it would be best if they could fix some of the current issue the game has right now. Like it would be at least more interesting to fight the bosses of God Eater if we had a more, let's say, polished game in terms of mechanics. Because, you know, a boss like the Virgin Bond, for example, which is another annoying boss I forgot to mention, is currently designed like it's a God Eater boss. In character it wouldn't be a problem to fight, but in this game it is. So at least if they could give him some downtime in its attack pattern, it would be a more interesting fight, I think. So anyways, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, leave a comment, tell me what you think. Maybe you have some other issues with this game that I didn't mention. So yeah, follow me on Twitter, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.